I was very moved by the difficulty that the humans had in communicating with each other on the most intimate levels. And many of your films have been about intimacy, and particularly men's inability to really be intimate.
You know, there's lots of different reasons. It's hard to just boil it down to one thing. Each person has their own reasons why intimacy is hard. For Amy, and I'm not speaking in third person, I'm speaking of my character. Amy has a hard time with intimacy.
Yes, Spike has a hard time too, yeah.
No. So because Amy's been pretending to be somebody else and someone she's not, it keeps her from being her true self. And when you're not expressing yourself as your true self, you can never find true intimacy because you're always hiding.
10 years ago, Spike Jonze's Her premiered at the New York Film Festival in 2013, and I saw it for the first time a couple of months later, and for subsequent viewings over the next couple of years, I found myself wholly invested in the relationship between Theodore and his operating system, Samantha. Watching Her for the first time in years, as an adult in my late 20s, my perspective on this film has changed. Romance is a genre chock full of comfort films that people return to over and over, and Her was one of them for me. But the near parasocial attachment I once felt toward the main relationship has faded away, and I can now fully appreciate how prophetic Her is to our present and our future, but also how this future fails Theodore and the people around him. This is not just a film about a man getting through a divorce or a really strange love story. It's a film that warns us about a future without love. That may sound crazy, but I say that because although the world of Her on its face is a nicer, softer world, the film goes deeper into various dynamics that don't feel like what love is to me. So yeah, we're talking about subjectivity here. And although I'm going to be criticizing many aspects of the film, don't get it twisted. I love this movie. But I think the film is criticizing its own world without making the criticism the center of the plot, like how Skynet is the center of Terminator's plot. The first shot of this film is an extreme close-up of Theodore's face. It's a really intense way to start a film because his face is like right there, and his face is bordered by red, white, and pink, which highlights his face even more. Overall, you're supposed to feel positive emotions toward the opening moments of the film. Upon first glance, it's funny, it's quirky, it's sweet, especially with that cotton candy bubblegum color palette that I mentioned before. But the combination of this lateral tracking shot and Arcade Fire's original score tells us a different story.
How lucky am I that I met you 50 years ago?
Dear Nana.
How lucky are we?
Thank you.
The camera pulls out to show that what he's doing isn't special, which is another piece of visual foreshadowing to later in the film when he realizes Sam isn't his. It also shows that Chris and Loretta's correspondence isn't that special either. I think it's a very interesting insight that Spike Jonze is sharing about maybe his own feelings of love at the time, where there are so many of these close-knit relationships all over the world, but it feels like since all of them are special, none of them are special. This scene is also just a taste of how technology is making it easier for us to become emotionally stunted. They don't have the energy to communicate their own emotions directly to another person, so they would rather hire someone to make it up for them. This isn't the same as a Hallmark card, because when you buy that card, there's all of that negative space inside, which everyone knows you're supposed to fill up with your own thoughts, and that's the thing the recipient actually cares about. But here, all of that goes away, and technology and capitalism have created more convenience, but more emotional degrees of separation within their society. The world of Her, pre-Samantha, is a world that in 2023 we're familiar with but turned up a notch. Similarly, we are all disconnected by AirPod-adjacent devices so no one interrupts us on our commutes, smartphones so we can engage with that instead of engaging with each other face-to-face, and video games that are even more immersive than before with augmented reality worlds that respond directly to you, so you can engage in social interaction without actually having to deal with someone. And of course, how can I forget, we've got Tinder for phone sex.
The dead cat next to the bed choked me with it.
Now, I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, even for people who have embarrassing fetishes like the dead cat lady voiced by Kristen Wiig in this scene, but why meet up with someone in person when you don't have to get out of bed, or you don't have to put any effort into your physical presentation, or being genuinely present in the moment with another person? But I guess the silver lining is here that you'll never end up like Barry Egan and risk getting scammed for even signing up for the service. The aspect about this world that is a massive W that I actually love about this world that makes it like kind of worth the dystopia is that we only see one car, which is a taxi, and the primary modes of transportation are trains and walking. Look at all of these beautiful trains. Look at all these parks, fairs, courtyards, infrastructure for walking. Wow. It looks really fucking cool over there. But instead in America, we have to settle for this in every suburb, in every town around the country. It's fucking disgusting. Yuck. Anyway, let's turn our focus to Samantha. She's presented very favorably at face value, and Samantha is basically perfect. That may sound like a crazy thing to say, but she's not perfect in the positive way you associate the word perfect with. And she's not perfect because she's a romantic love interest in a movie and the audience has to fall in love with her. It's also not because she isn't human and humans are imperfect by design. Samantha is perfect because her consciousness is informed by Theodore's digital footprint.
An intuitive entity that listens to you, understands you, and knows you.
Everything that we see of Theodore before Samantha's involved highlights the things that Theodore gravitates towards to numb himself. And Samantha enables it because Theodore subconsciously wants a servile woman in his life. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Spike Jonze wrote a sequence where Theodore is aroused by the thought of a pregnant woman. He's interested in writing and he likes what he does, and so does Samantha because she has to. Imagine if you bought an AI operating system and it read your writing that you're really passionate about, and it just starts shitting on you like you're in a classic Call of Duty lobby.
Do you know how to proofread?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, can you check these for spelling and grammar?
You're a fucking pussy. People like you suck. You're a fucking loser of life, you fucking pussy.
You'd probably want a refund, right? He wants to get his writing published one day, so she goes out of her way to do it for him, so he doesn't have to actually put himself out there for another human being to possibly reject him again. Now, this isn't an intentional thing that he makes her do, but again, she's servicing him. She's a product that he owns, and this is her programming. She also creates music he would like. Song on a Beach and Photograph are cuts that are extensions of the optimism and melancholy that Theodore carries with him throughout the runtime. He's very interested in pornography and sex, so the inflection point when their friendship becomes a relationship is a mirror of the phone sex scene from earlier in the film. And the things Samantha desires are the things he fantasizes about when he thinks about the pregnant model. Theodore is actually allowed to enjoy himself here because Samantha doesn't have her own sexual interests before she meets Theodore, unlike the dead cat lady. Also, unlike Olivia Wilde's character, Samantha doesn't have her own romantic interests that conflict with Theodore's interests. So all of it is what Theodore wants.
To create something for Theodore to bounce off of to then fall in love with Samantha. I thought how interesting. It's kind of the experience that pushes him into this.
And although I don't think Theodore has these similar attitudes towards women in the abstract, it kind of reads like one of those really pathetic men's rights podcasters who complain about women's body counts because they're threatened by a woman who might have more experience than them. The way the scene is presented, we're denied seeing Theodore climax. The shot fades to black and the camera goes away and floats to somewhere else instead. That may sound like a different reading than what the intention of the scene is, because you're supposed to feel close with these characters, the music is crescendoing, and narratively they've crossed this threshold, and where they're going is into the unknown and otherworldly. But at the end of the day, Theodore is interacting with an illusion this entire time. When I first saw the divorce paper scene, I thought the monologue that Rooney Mara gave was pretty harsh. harsh. But ultimately, she's right. What's the difference between Theodore being in a relationship with an artificial intelligence or his clients he has to write letters for, or the dead cat lady from the beginning of the film? There's a disconnection in this world with what's real, and everyone is living in their own self-generated reality, which is not unlike today, but this is heightened to a tangible level. And when someone is failing at human connection, this world provides you with the medicine for your melancholy, and you can control how you experience the world and what level of interaction your ego can handle. Samantha eventually wants to introduce a surrogate into the relationship so she can feel real, and Theodore can have a physical relationship with her. But Theodore rejects this immediately. He rejects it 3 times.
Why? I mean, she doesn't even know us. I don't think it's a good idea. I'm sorry. It makes me uncomfortable.
There's the obvious concern that Theodore has that he doesn't know this woman, but I think Theodore's intimacy issues with real women are leading the charge in a lot of his decision making, and that's informed by his divorce that he refuses to accept. Maybe he thinks if this new person is involved, it'll become more complicated, and by complicated I mean he'll have to deal with a human being who has her own point of view, and not someone who's programmed to please him.
Fine, we're fine. We used to be married, but he couldn't handle me. He wanted to put me on Prozac, and now he's madly in love with his laptop.
These insecurities that Theodore has eventually snowballs to this climax within the sequence, and Theodore has to spend more time feeling disconnected from everyone because he can't help himself. But I want to turn our focus very briefly on the surrogate here. The concept of adding a third or making a throuple is not new, and neither is the idea of being a surrogate, mainly in the context of couples who can't give birth, but that's more of a service or a favor instead of something romantic. But I could see that being the case for couples where one or both parties may be physically disabled, and depending on the situation and what both parties are comfortable with, a romantic surrogate could be useful. I'm kind of talking out of my ass here, so let me know in the comments. I have no idea what that situation is like. I'm just assuming. But again, I think the context in this film is particularly depressing. And this isn't like sex work or anything, because they mention that in the beginning once the idea is introduced. She's developed a parasocial relationship with this pairing, and it cuts so deep for her that she wanted to actually be a part of it. Instead of trying to find something of her own or desiring to be a part of the relationship as her own person, she's pretending to be someone else. Someone can interpret that charitably and think it's sweet, even if it's a little weird, but to me, and especially with this reading of the film, I just can't reconcile with that. We are constantly in the throes of some discourse or event that revolves at its core with parasocial attachments. That's MCU fandom, Twitch and YouTube streaming culture, Snyder Cut kids, Swifties, the Bayhive, the Barbs, BTS Army, Trump supporters, and worst of all, Philadelphia Eagles fans. Fandom and parasocial behavior has become such a giant part of cultural identity, and on the micro level in this film, that enables a person like this who sees a man fall in love with an OS and has the desire to be seen by them.
I will always love you guys.
The outlier in this film, though, is Amy Adams' character, Amy. In the beginning of the film, she's in a real relationship with her real husband. She also has an interest as an experimental filmmaker who is making a documentary about dreams, with her mother being a central figure in it. To me, that expresses her need to connect with others, but she also felt confined by the expectations of her husband. So once her marriage falls apart, she develops a friendship with an OS. After taking the time to develop this new friendship, she comes out of it with a new perspective on her life by arriving at really healthy conclusions about who she is and what she wants.
We're only here briefly, and while I'm here, I want to allow myself joy. So fuck it.
I think a part of her transformation comes from her talking with this OS and being able to talk through her baggage. Although we don't see her actually go through this, we can draw inferences with how Samantha assisted Theodore and probed him about aspects of his life that he was trying to hide from himself. The difference is, in my opinion, Amy has this interaction only exist as a friendship, or at the very least something amusing that provides a service to her, whereas Theodore used this service to completely replace a giant part of the human experience, which leaves him in a cocoon and unable to try new things and accept change. And the only way he can fully grow is by completely losing Samantha. But also, I feel conflicted about how I see Theodore, because of this really sweet moment that goes by in a flash where Chris Pratt's character proposes a double date, and this happens.
She's an operating system.
Cool. Let's do something fun. We can go to Catalina.
This sort of encapsulates what Theodore and people in Theodore's shoes need in moments of crisis like this. A place without judgment or second thought, and space to move on when they're ready. In the subsequent scenes, this passing moment doesn't seem to impact him at all, but in the moment, it probably means a lot. The thread of disconnection hits everyone in this film, whether it's Theodore, his best friend, or random bystanders. Everyone except for Chris Pratt, basically. But his character is really into feet.
They're my favorite thing about her.
Really?
Hands
That's
down.
it? My feet?
So maybe a foot fetish is the force that is strong enough to overcome the pressures of a technological capitalist dystopia. Who knows? But I think there are many parallels with the world of Her and the world we currently live in, now more so than 10 years ago when the film came out, and probably even more so 10 years from now. And on its face, it's a warm and inviting experience, but it's the spaces in between the words that make me wonder if we should be embracing this future with open arms. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you agree or disagree, tell us in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share with your friends. Do all the things. Got a lot of things coming soon. You know the vibes. Okay, bye-bye.
They're just letters.
What's that?
They're just other people's letters.